Great to be with you today. My name is Devan Jensen, or Jensen, as you said. I love that introduction. Let's talk about settling my beloved Cache Valley, where I was born. Cache Valley is in northern Utah, stretches over the border into Idaho, southeast Idaho, and it is a beautiful mountain valley. It's fairly level, it's well watered. It has the Cub River, the Bear River, and Bear Lake on the east, just over the mountain range. And so it's a beautiful area to be in. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the original inhabitants briefly. The Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation lived there for 5,000 years, and they lived in a lot of harmony with the native grasses and all the plants that grew there. They ate a lot of fish, and so it was a delicate balance there. They moved around, migrated around, and so then the early trappers came in the early 1800s to Cache Valley, and they would get the furs there and stash them or cache them in the valley, and that hence the name Cache Valley. Then Latter-day Saint immigrant William Gardner moved there in 1852, and a group led by Peter Maughan settled there in 1856. Logan soon became the main settlement. And between 1850 and 1905, about 22,000 Scandinavians joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, immigrating to America. So here's some of the places in Cache Valley. Like I said, there's Logan right in the middle, Paradise in the south, and then Franklin, Preston up north. So this is the story of Norwegian converts who helped settle Cache Valley and helped make it famous. That's my thesis. We're going to focus on the part of the valley that is in southeast Idaho. Why does this story matter? With our conference theme of Crossings, this is a story of migration and faith, survival and displacement, irrigation and community building, and tensions between law and belief. It is the story of the cultural heritage of Norwegians adapting to a new, rugged frontier life. So let's talk about conflict and colonization. 3 events in 1863 shaped this region's destiny. On January 29th, U.S. Army Colonel Patrick Edward Connor led troops against the Northwestern Shoshone near today's Franklin, killing about 400 men, women, and children in what became known as the Bear River Massacre. And I will just add that Darren Perry has done a lot of work to help restore that area and help. He's building a museum that will help honor that area. So grateful for him. Despite Brigham Young's policy of feeding the Indians rather than fighting them, the massacre marked the forced retreat of Native peoples from their homeland. Then on March 3rd, during the heart of the Civil War, Congress created the Idaho Territory. It was created because gold was discovered there, and he wanted to have precious minerals to help aid the Union efforts. President Lincoln also wanted to prevent the westward expansion of slavery, so that was established, opposing slavery. And on April 13th, Norwegians David and Serena Jensen left Oslo, then Christiania, with their infant Josephine and Serena's sister Julia. They wanted to join the saints on the way to their perceived Zion. Their faith, inspired by the hymn, "O My Father," gave them hope after losing a child. They received financial assistance from the Perpetual Emigrating Fund and began a long, perilous journey through Denmark, Germany, and England to New York, then westward by train, steamboat, and wagon during the Civil War. The Scandinavians crossed the plains in Captain Peter Nebeker's company of 50 wagons. Then their infant daughter Josephine died on the plains of Missouri, a searing loss that they carried as they reached Salt Lake City in August. After three hard years in Lehigh, by the way, Knut Peterson was there along with them, where another child died, they answered Brigham Young's call to move north to Cache Valley. In the 1860s, Cache Valley's population quadrupled as immigrants, especially British and Scandinavian converts, moved into established settlements. In 1866, the Jensens moved to the frontier fort of Franklin, here in this square rectangle, thought to be part of Utah territory, but just north of the border in Idaho territory. The area consists of rolling hills with the Bear River, Worm Creek, and the Cub River, then called the Muddy. Franklin created the first school in Idaho territory. Franklin soon became the mother town for new colonies spreading outward into grazing lands and creek valleys nearby. That year, William had built a 2-room summer cabin in 1866 in today's Preston, then called the Flat, a land covered with tall grass that was ideal for grazing. David worked at the sawmill in Franklin and was known for his strength and skills with the scythe. With Serena's consent, he married Julia as a second wife in 1868, an illegal practice that was common among the Latter-day Saints. That same year, he homesteaded 160 acres near Worm Creek. That area, to this day, is nicknamed Egypt because of its fertile wheatlands. And so it's kind of fun to say I've been in Egypt while in Idaho. David built ditches on each side of Worm Creek, the first water right. So let's talk about building a community. This is the Jensen family. So David, Serena, and Julia raised 14 children to adulthood and became civic and church leaders. Because Franklin was 8 miles away, they and the other settlers established local schooling in Whitney by 1877 and soon organized the Worm Creek branch of the church. In 1878, they built a log cabin, 16 by 18 feet, that served as the school, chapel, and social hall. The Cash Stake organized the Worm Creek Ward in 1879, naming Nahum Porter bishop and David Jensen as first counselor. Serena became first counselor in the Relief Society, and Julia served in the primary presidency. So all areas of leadership in that little ward. And in 1881, church leaders objected that Worm Creek sounded inelegant for a church name, so they decided to call it Preston, honoring William Preston, Bishop of the Cash Stake, and later presiding bishop of the church. By the way, I love that you said Preston Fourth Ward in your presentation, because I have attended Preston Fourth Ward many times. So the name stuck, and Preston, Idaho was born. So let's talk about water. Water was the lifeblood of the community. You can see all these reservoirs and canals that link Cache Valley from north to south. It's really, really a fascinating thing to look at the way that they colonized. So in 1880, settlers formed the Cub River and Worm Creek Canal Company to bring irrigation water to the Preston flatlands. Their community efforts, prioritizing collective survival over profit, typified early Latter-day Saint settlements. 36 men filed articles of incorporation and began the backbreaking work of cutting a 10-foot wide canal by hand through rock and sandstone. Serge Balloff wrote, "The real history of this work will never be written. As this old-timers expressed it, they dug a little ditch to get a little water, to raise a crop, to get bread, to get strength, to dig more ditch," right? That was how it was, a hard scrabble life. When the first water came through on July 4th, wow, that was a big significant day. We keep talking about it at this conference. In 1881, settlers paraded along the canal, cheering and giving the Hosanna shout, usually reserved for the most sacred ceremonies. This feat transformed Preston from a struggling outpost into a thriving agricultural community. Later enlargements and blasting projects in the 1880s expanded the system. To this day, local canal companies trace their origins to those efforts. Now, historian Einar Hammer later called David Jensen the father of Utah-Idaho irrigation, a title perhaps exaggerated, but reflecting the Norwegian pride in his pioneering role. Another Norwegian convert that we talked about at this conference, John A. Whitsoe, would later write best-selling books on irrigation and dry farming. These two men are fine examples of Norwegian contributions to the irrigation of the American West. Now, I just came across this recently from Utah State. They pointed out that there was a statue of John A. Whitsoe installed in Frøya, Norway. And so they basically look at that as a very significant contribution to the practice of both dry farming and irrigation. And those books are still in print to this day. John A. Whitsoe later became an apostle and president of Utah State University, and so he helped bring a lot of notoriety and worldwide acclaim to Cache Valley. So we're going to shift a little bit to talk about faith under fire. So in 1884, Serena died, leaving David technically monogamous, but federal marshals nevertheless charged him with unlawful cohabitation under the Edmunds Act. Hiding for nearly a year, he was captured in 1886 and tried before an openly prejudiced jury assembled by Marshal Fred T. Dubois, who boasted that, quote, he'd convict Jesus Christ if he were on trial, end quote. I don't know that that's a huge thing to boast about. On May 24th, 1886, David was sentenced to 6 months in the Idaho Territorial Penitentiary and fined $300, significant fine for that day. So it's interesting, you can look at this, these walls still stand there today, and I've visited several times, in fact, this year. Prisoners were stripped, shaved, and issued striped uniforms, a deep humiliation for men of faith. After serving his sentence, David returned home to resume family and community life. So, this is an important shift. Now we're going to talk about education and endurance. The Edmunds-Tucker Act of 1887 intensified persecution, dissolving the perpetual emigration fund, which had been so useful for the saints to emigrate, disenfranchising Latter-day Saints from voting. In response, President Wilford Woodruff urged each state to form its own academy to educate children. Thus began a series of 33 state academies from Canada to Mexico. When the community decided to start construction of an academy building in Preston in 1890, David Jensen became one of the largest donors and donated the land on which the academy stood. Completed in 1895, the academy educated generations of youth, including Harold B. Lee, a church president, and Ezra Taft Benson, another church president. Now, Ezra Taft Benson became known as the Secretary of Agriculture, and he made a slogan that became famous, famous Idaho potatoes, and so it brought a lot of notoriety to Cache Valley also, and Idaho generally. So, President Wilford Woodruff's manifesto, sorry, I skipped one slide. President Woodruff's manifesto of 1890 semi-officially ended the practice of plural marriage, closing a turbulent chapter in both church and frontier history. Now, a century later, Preston reappeared in popular culture when Napoleon Dynamite was filmed, where? By Jared Hess, who is a descendant of David and Serena, on the very Jensen homestead. So I think that's a fun connection. So again, Norwegian Americans helped settle Cache Valley, then later helped to make it become famous. Returning to the question that I started with, why does this story matter? It deeply matters because it honors these Norwegians who adapted to life in a new rugged landscape. The Norwegian saints of Cache Valley, led by families like the Jensens, transformed a harsh landscape into a living community through faith, hope, work, and cooperation. Their efforts in canal building, education, and settlement echoed their spiritual belief in gathering and consecration. From Oslo to Idaho, from tragedy and exile to endurance and innovation, their story encapsulates the Latter-day Saint frontier experience, one of both pioneering resilience and moral complexity, set against the backdrop of displaced Native peoples and the forging of new social orders in the American West. Telling this story honors our Norwegian cultural heritage, community care, environmental stewardship, industry, and perhaps a healthy measure of stubborn determination just to get the job done. Thank you.